Welcome. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad. So glad that you could take a few moments to join us today, and thank you for being with Open Door as we reflect. Today we are going to focus on the subject of look and live. Look and live. And we will be reflecting on how changing our perceptions and our focus can lead us to a place of healing and well-being. Look and live, how when we shift our focus and we shift our understanding and our perceptions, we can reach a place of healing and well-being, even in a toxic environment. Today, our text will come from Numbers, the 21st chapter, and we'll be looking at verses 4 through 9. This is when the people of Israel had been liberated from slavery in Egypt after 400 years, and they started off a long and arduous journey that took them quite a while, going through the wilderness, and yet the people were still a long way away from that promised land, that land of milk and honey that they so longed for. They were still en route. Picking up from verse 4 of this text, it said, "But the people became impatient on the way. The people spoke out against God and against Moses. 'Why have you brought us out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there's no food, there's no water, and we detest this miserable food.'" The text in verse 6 says, "Then the Lord sent poisonous serpents among the people, and they bit the people, so that many Israelites died. The people came to Moses and said, 'We have sinned by speaking against the Lord and against you. Pray to the Lord to take away the serpents from us.' So Moses prayed for the people, and the Lord said to Moses, 'Make a poisonous serpent and set it on a pole, and everyone who is bitten shall look at it and live.' So Moses made a bronze serpent and put it upon a pole, and whenever a serpent bit someone, that person would look at the serpent of bronze and live." This passage is an interesting passage, and it also ends up being a meaningful passage, particularly in the Gospel of John, because in many ways the idea of Jesus being crucified ended up the way they understood it. They interpreted it through this passage. In any case, we're going to focus on this passage. We see that the people of Israel had been through a long ordeal, 400 years of bondage, and after that, they were miraculously really delivered from that bondage. They were set free, even though the people of the Pharaoh and the leadership of Egypt didn't want to set them free. And after they were set free, the Pharaoh wanted to recapture them and bring them back in and pull them back into that old life. And God had miraculously delivered them from that with bold leadership on the part of Moses. Even though they were out in the wilderness, God was sustaining them and providing what they needed to survive. But the people had just gotten tired of it. They were tired of where they are. How many of us are tired of where we are? How many of us look around and we think about all the things that we don't have? They didn't have the types of food that they've been accustomed to eating. Water, obviously they were getting enough water to drink and make do, but water was still very scarce and still very precious. They were living in a period of scarcity where it seemed like they had just enough to get by. They were just getting what they needed. How many of us get tired of just living in scarcity rather than abundance? That maybe we're getting just enough physically, just enough emotionally, just enough financially. And we were just getting enough, and we're just scraping by, and we're just being sustained, and we're just making it. But yet, that promised land, that place of well-being, seems so far away from us. It seems so far away from us. Many of us can be tempted, like the people of Israel, and in fact, many of us do. We lose our sense of perspective. We lose our sense of gratitude. We lose our center. And that's what had happened, is that the people had become impatient. They had lost their gratitude. They had lost their joy. They had lost their sense of wonder about being in the journey. The journey had become old to them. They had become focused on the destination. They had become focused on the destination, on where they wanted to be, and they weren't focused on where they were. How many of us are like that, where we get so caught up in the life, thinking about the life as we want it to be, that we are not focused and grateful for the things that are. And it was this lack of gratitude, this lack of perspective, that led to these poisonous serpents. For many of us, verse 6 is a real challenge, where it says, "Then the Lord sent poisonous serpents." For many of us, I believe, in light of what we've learned about God through the example of Jesus, it's hard for us to imagine the Lord sending poison serpents. And for myself, I choose to look at it this way, that the results of their toxic thinking and their toxic attitudes was that a toxic environment emerged. A toxic environment emerged that where poisonous serpents came, and it took them out. Many times our toxic thinking, our lack of gratitude, really does lead to toxic results in our life. That when we're driven by fear, when we're driven by resentment, when we're driven by just a lack of gratitude, not being grateful for where we are in life, not being grateful for what we have, and we are driven by thoughts of deprivation, where we're feeling sorry for ourselves, it creates a really toxic environment that robs us of our joy, it robs us of our peace, it robs us of our well-being. It actually starts to strain our relationships when we look at each other and we start thinking about how other people are failing us, how our parents have let us down, how our children have let us down, how our best friends have let us down, how our employers have let us down, how society has let us down. When we start focusing in on all of those things, it leads to a really toxic and severe breakdown of our relationships. In many ways, this text is still asking us to become aware of these negative thoughts and thinkings in terms of what we focus on. I'm not saying they really were in a wilderness. We're not denying that reality. They really were dealing with scarcity. They had not reached their promised land anymore, where they hoped to be. And they didn't know when. And in fact, it turned out that there was going to be a whole generation that would actually die in the wilderness before the next generation made it to the promised land. But what do you focus on while you're in the wilderness? What do you focus on while you're in the wilderness? What do we focus on while we're in the wilderness? Do we focus on all the things that we don't have and how people have let us down? Or do we choose to place our focus on the things that we do have? Do we choose to place our focus on the fact that, gosh darn it, we are not in slavery, we're not in bondage in Egypt anymore, and I'm so glad that I'm not there. You know, I may not have all the types of foods that I want to have now, all the steak or the lobster. Yeah, that's very funny coming to me. I'm not a seafood eater, but the steak and the lobster, or whatever it is that people like to eat. We may not have that, but I have what I need to make it through. That God is providing for us, that God is sustaining us. One of the daily affirmations that's been a part of my life comes from one of the Psalms. For the overwhelming majority of days, actually start off with a daily affirmation that this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad. I've been doing that since maybe a little bit college, before my college roommate and former college roommate can verify. I would start my days with this affirmation. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad. Whatever else is going on in life, we want to center ourselves in gratitude and focus on the things that we do have, rather than the things that we don't have. We want to focus on the blessings that we are experiencing, rather than the blessings that we still long for yet. There's nothing inappropriate about wanting better, longing for better, working for better, dreaming better. There's nothing wrong with that. That's appropriate. Our dreams often are what get us up in the morning. Our dreams are often what drive us. But if our longing for the future causes us to denigrate and despise our present, that's when it becomes toxic for us. That's when it becomes harmful for us. That's when we create a toxic environment. We can do that with our children. We can do that with our spouses. We can do that with our friends. We can do that with ourselves. It's interesting that the people prayed that the snakes, poisonous snakes, would be taken away. And, it would have been nice if the passage said that those snakes went away. But in this passage, the snakes did not go away. The poisonous snakes were still there. In many ways, but when people were bitten by them, they could actually be healed. I believe that it would be so nice if we didn't run into toxic thinking, toxic environments, toxic attitudes, toxic individuals. It would be so nice if we didn't have any toxic thoughts or unhelpful thoughts, unhealthy thoughts. It would be nice if all those things were taken away. But that's not really the reality. The reality is that we do, in many ways, live in toxic times, in a toxic world, where people are not centered in gratitude, where people are grumbling and complaining, where not just pointing the finger externally, where oftentimes we lose our sense of gratitude, we lose our center, we fail to take joy and have appreciation for where we are because we're so focused on all the things that we don't have yet, that we don't appreciate what we do have. We are all subject to falling into toxic thoughts and attitudes and thinking. But this passage is reminding us to look and live, that when we find ourselves sinking into a toxic place, when we find that poison is living inside of us, that we can shift our focus and shift our perception, that we can actually look and live, that we can actually start to look around and take account of all the things that we do have. A number of years ago, I participated in a Facebook challenge where it was a gratitude challenge for 7 days in a row. I believe it was 3 unique things without repeating every day, just starting with 3 things that we were grateful for. It was kind of a gratitude inventory. And over the course of a week, we would list something like 21 different unique things that we were grateful for. In many ways, that was such a healthy and wonderful focus. The whole idea is that we start to look and live. Yeah, the reality is that most of us, or for much of our life, are much like the people of Israel. Perhaps we are here. Perhaps we have made it out of bondage and out of our place of real brokenness, but we're still on a journey to get to the place where we long to be. And sometimes we get tired, and sometimes we get impatient, and sometimes we lose our center. We lose our gratitude. We lose our joy. We lose our hope. We lose our sense of appreciation, and we begin to engage in toxic thinking. We even begin to contemplate going back to bondage, going back to slavery, going back to the things, because the change is hard and the environment is hard and transition is difficult. And yet, when we find ourselves falling into this text is inviting us to look and live, to really take a look at our thoughts, to take a look at our patterns of thinking, to take a look at our perceptions, and to shift them. Here, the people of Israel shifted their thinking again. They came to realize that their toxic thinking had created a toxic environment, and it was an environment and toxic thinking that even caused some people to die. And that if they continued to participate in that, many of them would die as well. That sometimes we have to decide that we're not going to participate in the toxic environment, but we're going to shift our focus, shift our perception, shift our understanding, and we are going to ground ourselves in gratitude, grateful for the ways that God is present in our lives now, grateful for the ways that God is sustaining us now. Even though we want to be sustained differently, and we long to be sustained differently, and we believe that we're going to be sustained differently, we're still going to be grateful for the ways that God's provisions and God's grace is showing up in our lives. Now, we're going to be grateful for the blessings that we do have now. We're going to take joy in this day, right here, right where we are, even though we may not yet be where we want to be. We want to look and live. Look around you. What are you grateful for? What things are bringing you joy? What things have you overcome? What is it about today that we can be grateful for, that we can rejoice and be glad in? So we rejoice and we will choose to be glad in where we are right now, this day. Even as we long for, strive for, work for, and journey towards an even greater destination, we will rejoice and be glad and be grounded in this day. And we will not participate in the toxicity of those that are around us. We will not participate in our own toxicity. We will walk away from it because we will shift our focus. First of all, we'll recognize the dynamic, the poisonous dynamic that we are a part of, and we will shift our focus. We will shift our understanding. We will look and live. By the power of the Holy Spirit, may be so for all of us. Amen.